second part of my tutorial. In our first part we went over coloring clouds and sky on our image Gardening May, which is a digital stamp from Semi Girl. In part 2 here we're going to be going over coloring the grass. So the colors that I'm going to be using in this tutorial are YG01, YG03, YG25, YG17, YG67, and YG99. So if you'll notice, I've already colored up May, and the clouds and her both have the same light source, which is coming from here. So we're going to keep that going in the grass by adding some nice shadows as well as adding plenty of texture. So I'm going to go ahead and scoot her up. So we're looking at this focal area. So slide these out of the way. I'm going to start off with YG01. Now I like a nice bright yellow-green for my grass, but if you like something a little different, that's totally up to you. You can still take the same technique that we'll be doing and applying it to other colors. I'm using Copic markers today, but I'm sure that you could take the technique and probably apply it to your Pro markers, Spectrum Noirs, or other type of markers that you might be using. So all I'm doing right now is laying down my base color, which is the YG01. The rest of the colors we'll be using to kind of build up texture and shadow. Now you'll notice that with the little plant here, I used some G's, or more of a, regular green than a yellow green, so that they stand out from each other. Alright, I'm not gonna mess with going all the way to the edges on this. Okay. So we've got our base down. Next thing to do is to look at our light source. Our light is in this image of how I colored it, coming from this direction. So while we add texture, we also want to keep that in mind and add our shading. So I'm using this is YG03, and I'm going to be using a flicking motion to add in texture to the areas of grass where you don't see any. Now this area right here, the first area I'm working on, has a shadow cast from her. So you'll notice as we go along that this area is going to be darker than a lot of the other areas, because she's casting the biggest shadow in this image. Cast shadows are very important for things when you're coloring in backgrounds, because it really helps your image actually sit in the background, or become part of the image rather than just floating on top. I'm just kind of right now roughing in where I want my shadows to be, and that's what I think I'm going to go with. So now I'm going to keep going and using very small, very light flicking motions to add in the texture. You'll also notice that they're all going in the same direction while still being random. The grass all stands up, so that's what you want your texture to look like. Come back over here and do the same thing. And getting a very light touch is something that you just have to kind of practice. You can hardly tell that you're touching the paper sometimes when you do it. A tip I mentioned in the last video that I want to mention here too is I always suggest that you cut your image out if you're going to use it in a die before you go ahead and color the background. That way you're not wasting your time and effort coloring things that aren't even going to make it onto your project. My next color is YG25. This is slightly darker. And I'm just going to keep building up my shadows and textures. You'll notice that here I kind of established the shadow for her, and then I'm kind of blending it out with my texture. So instead of like your typical blend where it would smooth into another color, I'm using the texture I'm laying down to do that for me. You'll notice that I'm not going to worry about blending anything in this one at all, just letting the texture do the work. So I've got my shadow, and now the same thing, I'm just going to start adding some more texture. Because even though this is an open area, you have your blades of grass, you know, lay over each other. One casts shadow onto another, so it's good just to kind of build up your texture. It adds a lot of visual interest. Alright. Next is YG17. And you do the same thing. I'm a very big fan of layers of color. So that's why you'll see that I use a lot of different ones when I color. Okay, and then I'm going to work on adding less, but still some, of these last few colors into my grass. Since we're being nice and random, you can see all the different colors showing through between and underneath. Okay. Next, YG67. This is where you'll start to see the greens start to lend themselves more toward a shadowy gray color. I'm also a big fan of contrast, so I like to go nice and dark with my shading. So if you are not, don't feel like you have to go as dark as I do. This texture concept will still work for you with softer colors. Now I'm not adding as dense of shadow like I did here over here because the shadow cast by this plant is further away from the grass than the shadows cast by her or by the gloves that are down in the grass. I'm only going to add a little bit, kind of speckle it around, of this color in the grass. I still want it in there to tie everything together. I don't want to go overboard. Okay. And then my last color is YG01. And this is where it's definitely optional, but I like a nice dark shadow. And if you usually don't, but you like the way it looks, you know, print out a couple extra images and try it and see what you think. You never know, you might, going out of your comfort zone might give you something new that you can work on or play with and try to incorporate into how you already color. Alright, and lastly, all I'm going to do is go back all the way up to the near the beginning with my YG03 and just kind of go back and add a little more. It's not that I'm blending everything together, because I wouldn't want to lose all this texture we've been working on, but just to kind of bring it together. So it brings it together, but you can still see the original YG01 underneath. And there we are. And that is our full image, Gardening May digital stamp from Summit Girl. I hope you've enjoyed both of these tutorials. The color list that we've used, as always, is down in the comments. And check out our other videos and subscribe to our channel. We are also on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Well, we're on YouTube. Check out our blog, which is summagirlblog.com. And then you can also find me on my personal blog, which is www.theadgirl.com. Every Wednesday I do a live Ustream show that, if you want to, you can check out. Just search Summit Girl on Ustream. We'll see you next time.